Do it for the pod.
All right. Welcome to SyrupCast Episode 5, the definitive podcast for all your Canadian mobile needs. This week, in addition to Douglas, hello Douglas,
Hello.
we have Jane McIntaggart. Did I say her name right?
Yes, you did.
Amazing. Jane joins Mobile Syrup after spending far too long at a site not dedicated to mobile and thus missing out on all of the good stuff. Jane has 7 years of writing in the tech space. She makes us both, me and Douglas, cumulatively look like noobs. And she comes with a fresh look on the tech industry and lots of great writing experience. So we welcome her. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with Mobile Syrup. And we look forward to having many a podcast with you in the future.
Yeah,
Thank
you. Even our writers are Macs.
That's right. So last week we were criticized for going a bit too long. Doug and I tended to ramble and criticize children for driving while texting, or texting while driving. That's pretty much driving while texting because you do more texting than driving, but I digress. So this week we'll try to keep it a little bit shorter. We're going to talk about Visa Checkout, which I went to San Francisco to check out. We're going to talk about Microsoft and Rogers both laying off a significant number of people. Microsoft far more than Rogers, but both impacting businesses we talk about quite often. And we're also going to talk about a new regulation in the European Union that may have an impact in North America down the road on what exactly is a free app. Can you call an app that pushes you to buy something even though you download it for free a free app? We'll talk about that a little bit later. And we'll talk about that massive Apple and IBM deal that was announced last week and we covered in a tete-a-tete. Finally, we will talk about the NVIDIA Shield tablet, and that was the new Tegra K1 based tablet that was announced earlier this week. So let's jump right in. Visa launches Visa Checkout. Doug, do you care about being able to pay for things on your phone? And I don't mean being able to go to a store and tap on a touchless payment terminal. I'm talking about more easily being able to pay for something like at the movies or at Amazon on your phone.
I only care about being able to pay easily in the way that is most convenient for me. So whatever format that takes, I don't care. I want ease of use and I want ubiquity. I don't want to have to know or have to consider which way I'm going to pay at each location that I'm at based upon a lack of infrastructure, right? So that's where I'm at. Now, does Visa Checkout help us get there, or is it another initiative that is what we would consider in the Breaking Bad terms a half measure?
All right, Haircut, thank you for that. So let's talk about what Visa Checkout is. It's basically a way to store your credit cards in a secure vault, not only Visa cards, but MasterCards, Amex, and Discover cards that when applied to a vendor, like a merchant in Canada, the first ones are Cineplex, Lululemon, Staples, etc. They make it easy to log in once with an email address or a phone number and access all of your credit cards, all of your shipping addresses, and all of your billing addresses. And the process usually takes about 10 to 30 seconds depending on the speed of your internet and how many steps the vendor needs you to do afterwards. But basically, when you're deciding on how you want to pay for something, this just makes it really easy to choose a credit card from within your vault. MasterCard actually launched something last year called MasterPass, and Visa Checkout is practically identical. It seems like the APIs are a little bit simpler to implement, but it still will take vendors about 2 to 3 weeks to add the functionality. So I think this is an interesting product, and I really like the fact that it's going to be easier to pay for things. But Jane, have you ever had the urge to kind of, basically they're saying will make it a lot faster for you to pay for things because you won't have to re-enter your credit card information and won't have to type in your address every time you want to pay for something online. Has that been a thorn in your side before?
So am I right in saying that this is kind of like single sign-in but for shopping?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's basically
up until now,
checkout.
I haven't really been sure what it actually is, but it is like when you're explaining it's like single sign-in. So I think this is, in light of that revelation that I've just now had, I think it might be the least sexy but most important use in mobile payments in a long time, because you can, yeah, like I mean, there is a certain amount of setup involved, but once it's set up, it's there for life, right? Can you add to your wallet, I guess?
Well, that's
like
the
more
thing.
Cards and stuff.
They don't want loyalty cards to be in play here. Unlike MasterPass, which is trying to create a virtual wallet including all your auxiliary loyalty cards, Visa Checkout just wants to be a conduit for faster payments, because Visa as a company is a payment company.
So it's not a wallet at all. It's literally just single sign-in.
It's single sign-in, basically Facebook, Google, PayPal, but just for your credit cards,
But just for, so I think the single sign-on analogy is apt in the case that we're describing right now, in the sense that it's not a wallet.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything else. Yeah.
It's specifically, and not only in the sense that it doesn't do anything else, but it also doesn't. A wallet holds all your cards, and to my knowledge, this is just for Visa cards, correct?
Well, no, it's just for. They do allow for Visa, MasterCard,
yeah.
Amex, and Discover.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the second thing here that we have to talk about in terms of sign-on is security issues, because as we've seen with Heartbleed, security, like there are major, if this becomes universally adopted as the de facto standard for payment sign-on, single payment sign-on, that's just creates one point of access for your information to potentially be stolen.
Right.
And so I don't know if you want to take that, or my third not really concern, but just a question that I want to toss out to you guys is that, do you want this? Is this a kludge?
What's a kludge?
A stopgap measure.
Okay.
Like a MacGyver-like hack, I guess.
Okay.
Or would you rather have someone like Visa implementing this, or would you rather have it be at the OS or device level?
Well, the thing is, they already do have it somewhat at the device level for physical payments. So when you're talking about payments in stores, you're talking about NFC-based payments using a secure element inside of a SIM card. So you'd buy this SIM card from Rogers or Bell or Telus, and you would then store your credit card credentials on that secure element, and then pair it with your phone. So if your phone gets stolen, it's no different than having somebody then being able to call Visa and canceling that SIM card, because the credentials are for that phone only, and therefore once the card is canceled, the payment won't work anymore. The same thing happens here. So not only yes, it's true that you're storing all your credit card information in one spot, but what you're also doing is it's still going through the motions of Visa, still going through the motions of processing every single payment that goes through its system. So they're the only company that has instant processing of every transaction that goes through their Visa net, and basically that means they're comparing your purchases against previous purchases and against trends and against location to decide whether or not that's a valid transaction.
They probably get to charge A, a nice processing fee, and then B, get all the data, the usage data. So I understand why it's compelling for them. But I think you were in San Francisco, and I think they also gave you access to this and maybe a card to try it with. So what's, from your experience, is it from a user perspective, is it easy? Is it useful? What are there hiccups? Like, what's the?
It's basically the equivalent of responsive web design for payments. So you have the same experience on a mobile phone as on a tablet, as on a web page on your laptop. It's an overlay, so they use an API to overlay Visa checkout on top of the existing merchant's website. So if they demoed it at Pizza Hut, because that's going to be one of the first vendors in the US to use it. You tap on checkout with Visa, it pops up right in front of you, you enter your username and password, you choose the credit card, you press OK, and then you continue on with the workflow at Pizza Hut's own website. And they've implemented all of the information that you took from the Visa website, but they don't store any of that information on their server. So it's important to know that the actual payment, the payment for information per user is not stored at Pizza Hut's website anymore. That's important because when you're giving them your credit card before, you're actually asking them to store it on their side, and that opens up a target-like, potential breach.
Yeah.
So we're removing that from the equation as well, and we're also adding on all of Visa's own security. So they're promising triple encrypted transactions. Eventually, they'll be using tokenization, which is something that is going to have huge implications for the industry, and we don't really have a lot of time to get into it. But it basically hides the processing information and the credit card number from the transaction itself and swaps in a bunch of random numbers that uses what they call a token in place of that real information. So nobody could ever reproduce the actual user information because it's just a string of random numbers, and they use cryptography. Yeah, exactly. So I found it to be a very easy to use product. I don't think it's better than MasterPass. I think it's pretty much exactly the same. I think that Visa, however, is going to push it far more than MasterPass was in Canada, because right now Visa has they have a $500 million ad campaign or something insane that they're putting out in the U.S., and it's going to come to Canada early next year.
Okay, so I guess that was my question in terms of just so it sounds cool, but if it's no different than the competing options, how do we get to the point where we only have to choose one and use it rather than flipping back and forth between different payment solutions? I don't want to have to think about this. Once I have to think about it, I'm gonna use something easier. Like, I want to use the easiest thing. I want no friction. I just want to give you money. So what will it take for them to get to that point? Just the marketing budget, or
no? They're partnering with websites. So MasterPass has not really done a great job partnering with popular companies to implement the MasterPass APIs on their merchant websites, whereas Visa is going after the big companies that are used most often by Canadians. So they're, as I said, Cineplex is one of their first clients. They have Tiger Direct. They have Lululemon, Staples. Eventually, they'll get a ton more. So I think that's important, is that they're partnering with the right people to get more exposure for the product. And eventually, they're going to combine Visa Checkout with the physical payment in store on your phone when you're, tapping your phone.
That was going to be my question. Like, how is this going to transfer to mobile? Like, it sounds like it's really handy for when you're ordering pizza from Pizza Hut's website, but how is it going to transfer to when I walk into the store? Like, how will it affect that experience?
Right now, it won't. Right now, it's just for payments made on your phone online, and they have an SDK for Android and iOS developers. So somebody like Frank and Oak or even Amazon or whatever could implement Visa Checkout on their own mobile app and make it easy for people to pay and access their credit card information without re-entering it all over again. So it has a potential. I think it's going to be very interesting. If Visa is not taking this mobile this push into mobile lightly, they're really moving quite quickly on this. But there wasn't anything groundbreaking in the product itself. So that's something that I think they need to fix. If not from a marketing perspective, then from an implementation perspective. All right. Well, so let's talk about Microsoft and Rogers. So these kind of go together. We have some sad news coming out of Microsoft, especially out of the Nokia division. So
we have sad news coming out of Rogers, and we have extremely goddamn depressing news coming out of Microsoft, or for anyone that's ever worked for Nokia or owned a Nokia. Yeah, it's.
Is it depressing for people who lost their jobs? But is it depressing for us as mobile enthusiast? I don't think so.
Well, for anyone that ever owned a Nokia phone and thought it was at one point hot shit, like I think so.
I own several Nokia phones and thought they were hot shit, but I was telling Daniel this morning, I was looking at the numbers for this, and Nokia had 25,000 employees. Like that's nuts. That's bananas. Like, what do those people do all day? Like, when they went to, like, I feel like Nokia has been in such dire straits for so long, especially before, like, the partnership for Windows Phone, that I can't imagine what those 25,000 people must have done all day other than just, like, run the Department of Despair. Like, there's no, like, we were talking about how Microsoft is the same problem. They've got, like, 127,000 people working for them. And that's doubled in, like, the last 10 years. That's twice as much as they had 10 years ago. And they have done nothing, I think, over the last 10 years to warrant double the employees.
Okay, so
like this is like a fat trimming exercise that will make both companies healthier.
Okay, so the problem with that is that Elop got millions of dollars for selling the company and gutting it, and those employees are suffering for a lack of leadership.
I'm not saying it's not depressing from, like, a people story. I'm saying it's not depressing in terms of, like, innovation and progression for Microsoft and Nokia, who have been, I feel, stalled for far too long, especially now that I know how many people they have working for them.
So let's talk about the numbers. Okay. Microsoft announced earlier, I believe it was last week, that they are going to cut 18,000 jobs from the company. As Jane said, there are over 100,000 employees there, but 18,000 is still it's 15% of their organization. 70% of those 18,000 people came from Nokia's Devices and Services division. So when Microsoft spent $5.2 billion buying Nokia and integrating it into the company, people knew that these layoffs were coming. But 70% of an entire layoff coming from a single organization means that clearly there was too much overlap. So Microsoft had already been investing heavily in its own Devices and Services division. So if they weren't already working on a smartphone, which this probably indicates that they were, because we heard for years that a Surface phone was coming, and it never materialized. Maybe they had already been working, the same people working on the Surface tablets had been working on a phone.
Well, but also, I think you look at so Microsoft released its financials yesterday.
Yes.
As well, and when they were breaking down the Nokia numbers, it seemed like the vast majority of the phones that Nokia sold were feature phones, right? I think it was something like they sold like 30 million feature phones, and only, I want to say 5 million.
5.5 million Lumias. But to be fair, the numbers they didn't include the entire quarter. They included April 26th when the deal was finalized through to June 30th, which is not the full quarter. So we just have to keep that in mind. But it was
my point being, though, is that the people that are going to get laid off aren't going to be the people making the high-end Lumia phones. It's going to be the feature phone makers, which are actually the phones that are selling.
That's what I was going to say. That's where Nokia is making money.
So you have a situation where a CEO comes in, completely rips apart a company, sets fire to its own platform, which it says it was burning, then sells the company to Microsoft, only to then have it lay off a huge component of that sale because there's new leadership at Microsoft. So I think you see in these situations, the reason why it's sad is because you have these large, powerful companies with a history of doing interesting things. And we want strong companies in the industry because they're the people that actually are able to affect change. And you have Microsoft and Nokia suffering from severe lack of leadership or from
direction.
Direction. A constant turnover of leadership, which I guess it's like the CEO rule number one is whatever the previous guy did, you immediately have to undercut. Like you can never, and it's to bring BlackBerry into this because I always do. There's a reason for that because if you're just executing the last guy's plan, you don't really have a chance to divert from that. I just don't see. I don't see why how Microsoft benefits from doing this, other than in saving money. Could
That is
not
the
be
only
right?
benefit, and that is the only way. So first of all, Nokia made $2 billion in revenue, and they still ended up losing $692 million. So that speaks volumes, not only to the fact that Nokia was a terribly run organization, but that they had far too many employees. So this culling was to cull the a number of salaries, which was probably a huge amount of its expenditures, and to consolidate departments, because you can't have two devices and services divisions doing the exact same thing.
So why are they doing the exact same thing? What you're saying, I understand there's always redundancy, but you're basically saying you paid, I think, $6 billion for a company, and only 1 out of every 4 employees was worth keeping.
Yes, but the 1 in 4 employees will help Microsoft create a smartphone strategy, which right now we can all agree is not working, but they didn't have the manufacturing capabilities nor the carrier relationships to go alone. And I think you're right. Stephen Elop's, they sold them a turd, but there was nobody else. I mean, Microsoft wasn't about to buy any other OEM. They weren't going to go out and purchase Lenovo. They weren't going to go out and buy some, Chinese manufacturer, or Samsung or LG. I mean, this is a software company that's dabbling, or now it's more of a cloud company that's dabbling in hardware.
Yeah, that's a perfect point. And you also need to realize that, I think it was Stephen Elop said in his memo to employees today, that he was like, Nokia was 100% focused on producing great hardware, whereas producing great smartphone hardware is such a tiny, tiny part of what Microsoft's does every day, and they don't need 25,000 people to do that. Which is why when you say, oh, they're laying off, 70% of their layoffs were from one company that they acquired, it's like, that's because still keeping 12,500 people to produce smartphone hardware, which is so not a priority for Microsoft, that it's unrealistic. It just wasn't going to happen.
I just think there's a world out there where Nokia is an independent company producing great hardware and making not stupid.
It was 2002.
Yeah,
well, it was 2008, and the thing is that
they
Microsoft
sold 30 million feature phones. So as Android and Apple look to expand to emerging markets with low-cost handsets, Microsoft is laying off the employees at a company that are selling feature phones globally.
But do you not think that the 12,500 people Microsoft still employs from Nokia are capable of producing feature phones that will sell, as well as the odd flagship here and there?
Well, okay, let's look at it from this perspective. 30 million feature phones is not a whole lot of feature phones compared to where Nokia was just 3-4 years ago. They were selling hundreds of millions of phones every year. Samsung is now selling hundreds of millions of cheap phones every year, and they're all running Android. So when you look at it like that, they couldn't have continued on Symbian. Symbian was a burning platform. As much as the hardcore Symbian users say otherwise, it wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't extensible. It was not touchscreen friendly. It was done. It was over. So let's move on. Samsung sold 300 million units in 2013, according to Gartner, and Nokia wasn't even in the top 5. It was underneath Apple, Samsung, Huawei, LG, and Lenovo. So let's be serious here. Nokia had no choice; they had to be bought. They were either going to go under, or they had to be bought, and they knew that by being bought by Microsoft, they would have to suffer the consequences of redundancy, and that's just what happened.
It's sad. I'm a bleeding heart, but it's sad.
You
don't think that this is better? You don't think this is going to create a leaner, healthier company?
What company? Microsoft?
Well, okay, a leaner, healthier department within Microsoft, which already seems to be so confused about what it's doing with regard to smartphones.
I that would require me to have faith in Microsoft's strategy, which is
That's what I'm saying. So do you not see this as encouraging? Where you had Steve Ballmer, who ran the place for 10 years, and you had instances of where you were seeing the kin announced, like, weeks before Windows Phone 7. And Satya Nadella comes in, and there's all this bloat and a lack of direction, and it's his job to instill some kind of direction. And Nokia had a similar problem. There was no direction. So don't you see this as like a positive step forward into creating a direction for smartphones within Microsoft?
Yes.
Maybe, but it was if that's the barrier that we're trying to get over, then that's really sad. But just so I was just as you were talking, sorry, I was looking for a tweet. So there was a great tweet by Sven Grudberg that I saw a few days ago when the news broke. That part of the changes comes with obviously Nokia dumping the forked Android OS that they were working on for Microsoft, which duh. But so that's the fourth OS to be dumped by Nokia in 3 years. That's Symbian, MeeGo, and Windows Phone 7.5 and the Nokia X platform.
Hold on. Hey. Windows Phone 7.5 is not a different OS than Windows 8. That's like saying Apple discontinued iOS 6 for iOS 7.
Yes, because none of the apps worked. It was a completely different platform. They renamed it.
Yeah, they rename, but they always rename. I mean, it's an ARM-based OS. The same thing happened with Windows RT. The incompatibility was due to a different kernel.
Daniel.
It's true. I don't buy the whole Windows Phone 7.5 being a completely different OS than Windows Phone 8. It was fundamentally different in its framework and its kernel, but as a consumer-facing platform, it was just a continuity of what had been out for 2 years already.
I'm just saying 18,000 people are now out of a job because of what's happened in the past 4 years.
18,000 people are out of a job because Microsoft was too big, and they made too many products diffusely, and now they're focusing on making fewer products better. And I'm sure a lot of those Nokia employees were from that Nokia X line, or were from the accessories line, or were from the defunct R&D line that is now being consolidated into Microsoft. It totally makes sense. It sucks. I agree with you. And Microsoft's going to have to pay out a lot of severance, but it was an inevitability. What may not have been an inevitability, though, was Rogers' hundreds of layoffs. So let's talk about that, because this seems to be just one more in a line of cuts at Rogers in order to get Guy Lawrence's Rogers 3.0 vision up and running. So what do you say about that?
There are
Doug?
three of us now. So I think that I'm going to completely make myself appear to be a hypocrite simply because I care far less about this. It's simply because this seems to be a much more targeted layoff towards a goal which is enviable if not achievable, which is Rogers is replete with middle management, and they're trying to streamline their org. This is a company that is,
come on,
if not too big, burdened by different silos of interest and business, and there's just a whole layer within that company of people looking to protect their jobs and their silos. So if this actually helps Rogers become a company that can truly execute towards their 3.0 plan, then it's a good thing. It's also happening on a scale which is significantly less than the Microsoft cuts.
Because there's only 10,000 employees at the entire company.
Well,
The
fair.
entire company is Canadian.
Why is it that you're like, I said, this is working towards like a leaner, healthier Microsoft, and you said that would require you to have faith in Microsoft. Why is it that you have more faith in friggin' Rogers than you do Microsoft?
Because Microsoft didn't buy something and then destroy it. Or sorry, Rogers didn't buy something and then destroy it in a way that Microsoft.
One could argue that Nokia was destroyed well before Microsoft ever bought it.
If Rogers had
And
say purchased Wind and then laid off all the Wind employees, I would be just as upset at Rogers. But companies have to
Nokia
respect.
wasn't an innocent bystander in this. Nokia was the one who chose to go with it. Nokia is the one who said, burning platform, let's go with Windows Phone, which is almost equally as unpopular.
That was because Microsoft was paying them. Well, there was
Yeah, but
basically
they still took the money. Like, it's not like they weren't coerced into choosing Windows Phone as their platform of choice.
they weren't coerced, but
They made bad business deals.
they had no other option at the time. I mean, they had, we heard about Nokia's dalliance into Android, but
Yeah.
that started far earlier than merely with Nokia X.
Yeah,
They
it
had
did.
tested Android on Lumias in 2011, and they just didn't want to be another OEM to compete against Samsung.
I get
I,
you. So I agree that you're making my point for me in the sense that the Rogers cuts being smaller are much more of a mild course correction than the repercussions for what some people call radical stupidity or criminal misjudgment at a CEO level. So I think, I also think that, layoffs are never fun. Good people go. But this is much easier to swallow than what happened with Microsoft. I don't think that these all layoffs are not the same.
Agreed.
I agree.
100% agree. But the scale here is different because you're talking about a company that earns $3 billion in revenue a quarter over a company that earns $23 billion in revenue a quarter and operates in almost every country in the world versus operates in one country, and that's our stupid country, which has basically an oligopoly among the three telcos. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. This is probably what Rogers needs to do. It has been lambasted over the years for its customer service issues, for its middle management bloat, for its redundancy in products, its confusing product offerings, its so-called bundles that aren't really bundles but are just disparate attempts at joining these portions of the company together. But this is an actual move to make Rogers into a single company where everybody talks to one another. Because when I call Rogers about my cell phone bill and then I want to talk to them about my cable bill, I actually have to talk to a different representative. That should never be the case. If I had to go to Apple, to my Genius, and say, I want my iPhone and my iPad fixed, and they say, well, you've come to the right place because I will do both of them at the same time, because that's what they were trained to do.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that is ingrained even far deeper, where you look at what Rogers, like the way that Rogers corporate treats Rogers retail, and the fact that there's no uh, connection between those different divisions. So I posed a hypothetical before about my lack of faith in Microsoft turning those layoffs into anything other than a cost saving measure. Do you guys feel, and I'll put this to Jane because
Because I am very impassioned about this
you're
cause.
very passionate about this, do you feel that this will help Microsoft make its transition, or do you have any faith in Rogers making its transition to their 3.0 plan to improve?
I would say, yeah, I would say
uh-oh. Looks
Oh,
like
did
we
we
lost
lose
her.
her?
I feel
She'll
like
be back.
I still disagree that I'm saying that it will help Microsoft. I think that I think my opinion of I know that they're not all the same. All layoffs are not created equal. But I do feel that if like change, I think change requires action. I think that this is. I think it will. I think this is the right direction. I don't know if it will be enough, but I think it's the right direction. I think that Rogers might be a little too set in its ways. We'll see.
Okay, so
I think,
let's
yeah.
actually let's
Sorry.
quote a Rogers representative. They're doing this in order to become a more nimble, agile organization. I mean, those words would never be associated with Rogers or any of the telcos in Canada. I mean, you could barely call Wind a nimble, agile organization, and it only has 750,000 subscribers. I think that's the goal here is probably quite it's noble in the sense that Rogers is trying to cut whatever middle management bloat it has, and Guy Lawrence has not been afraid to cut to cut managers in this equation too. It's not just store level employees and developers and engineers that are getting cut here. It's not just salespeople. 15% of the people being laid off in this several hundred strong cutting they come from the VP level. So,
yes. So now these
huge.
these are the type of people. These are not necessarily the people doing the work day to day and making things happen, but they're the type of people that need to be informed by any strategic decision. So these people can actually, in an effort to do their job, slow the speed at which a company can make radical changes, and if they've been ingrained long enough, protect against change because they've lost faith in the company being able to do anything. So it is a bit of a house cleaning, noble or otherwise. I think it's one of the things that probably has to happen for a company like Rogers to change its culture.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I do think it's definitely a culture change as opposed to, I think Microsoft is definitely like, they need to cut out the fat and they need to cut like the people who seem to not be doing anything. Whereas I think for Rogers, it's definitely a culture change, like you said. So it's taking those people who are probably too institutionalized to change and who are resistant to change just because it's been that way for so long, so why bother?
Because you can't fire them.
Yeah.
Wait, hang on. You're saying that there's been no culture change at Microsoft in the last 2 years?
Last 2 years, yes, but I'm also saying that the person who was in charge over the last 2 years didn't foster that change and didn't nurture it.
I think
I think it's more that the Microsoft layoffs don't reflect a culture change.
Yeah.
Simply because those employees weren't at Microsoft long enough to be a part of any culture.
No, I agree with you that the layoffs themselves don't signal a culture change, but I would argue that the culture change started a long time ago. It started with the move to cloud computing, to Azure, to cloud hosting, over to subscription-based Office, to focusing on Xbox.
Those are strategic decisions.
Those are not that's not a culture change. That's like a change in product. That's a change in focus. That's not a culture change. That's not a change in how the people who are running the business think.
No, I disagree. I think that it has been they've needed a fundamental culture change in order to stop putting all of their eggs in the Windows basket. I think they had to,
but they're
to right the ship.
They're still promising a unified platform at the time. It's been a year, and you still don't have Windows apps on Xbox One.
They're not talking about Windows apps on Xbox One. They're talking about Windows Phone apps and Windows RT apps being a single executable and a single developer platform. And I think that is going to happen sooner rather than later.
I don't think anything Microsoft is ever planning to do can ever be described as soon. I think that with that many employees, it's like trying to turn the Titanic. Like, they can say that they're going to do it now, and like Doug said, they've been trying to do that for a year, and the thought that came into my head was like, a year is nothing in terms of Microsoft timelines. This is a company that takes them so very long to do anything.
Okay, think about this. This is a company that almost admitted that Windows 8 has been an unmitigated disaster. It has been. And yet the company earned $23 billion in revenue and $6.7 billion in operating profit in a single quarter. Mm-hmm. How can you say that the culture change has not already started, since they're no longer deriving nearly as much revenue from their, quote unquote, failing Windows department? So much of their revenue now is coming from cloud computing and cloud services, and that just wasn't true a few years ago.
Because none of the decisions that have been made have led to new revenue. Those are all legacy things. Those are all Ballmer initiatives, or initiatives that happened under his tenure. And I still think there's a very big break between strategy and culture.
I agree.
And a lot. If you look at the Rogers 3.0 plan, we were talking about this yesterday. I was making a significant amount of fun over it because a lot of it seems not strategic, and it seems very airy-fairy and PR-based, but that's because a lot of it is internally focused towards changing the way that they approach customers or their own innovation or how they operate. rather
That's
than
culture
saying we're going to
change.
go attack this market. Yeah, I think it's more that's certainly more cultural. Now, I think I think on either side of this, we would say that some of us are very cynical about the capacity for either of these companies to achieve it, but I just don't, again, not all layoffs are made equal. Although I will say we are probably the most conservative Canadian mobile podcast ever, as we seem to be pro-layoff, anti-teenagers texting while driving. And I just don't know how to feel about that. We're very old.
But we're all drinking, so
Yeah.
that's good. So,
Cheers.
but we're drinking while standing, not driving.
Sloshed cat.
Okay.
So-
do we want to talk about even older companies or companies of the same age making what I would say would be extremely smart strategic decisions that reflect new culture?
Or extremely intelligent cultural changes on both ends, yes.
Yes.
Let's talk about Apple and IBM. So Doug and I wrote a tete-a-tete about this. I was in San Francisco when this broke, and it was one of those things where my jaw probably dropped because this was a move that nobody really saw coming, but once it was explained, it made a whole lot of sense. Apple and IBM are working together on pushing Apple hardware in the enterprise, and IBM is going to create over 100 apps for specific verticals for iPhone and iPad. And from what we saw yesterday from Apple's earnings, where they sold less than 3 million less iPads in the Q3 quarter of this year than they did last year, points to a slowdown in iPad growth and iPad sales, and this is going to foster a new kind of iPad user, an iPad user that has all the apps it needs to replace a bunch of different services on, say, Windows PC, and will enable them to be a lot more mobile. So, Jane, what do you think about this? Coming from, I mean, you were around a lot more enterprise focus at Tom's than we have been. Does this feel right to you? This partnership?
I think it does, and I think the main reason is that we're in the bring your own device age where IT departments are seeing more people saying, I want to bring like my own device, and a lot of the times that is an iOS device because people want to use the same devices at work as they've been using at home, and I think that's where I guess enterprise stands to gain from this is that you have Apple devices running enterprise grade software, and enterprise is something that Apple was never ever going to be able to do well. Like enterprise at that level, like you could say that they're going to do business well, but I don't think Apple would ever be able to do enterprise like IBM does enterprise. Similarly, IBM would never be able to do consumer level devices the way Apple does.
Well, because culturally they don't care about enterprise. And
geez, the word of the day.
Whatever Tim Cook says about him getting 80% of his work done on his iPad, at the end of the day, they care about selling their hardware.
Yeah.
So for them to partner with a company.
And then, yeah, exactly. This is not about Apple admitting a weakness, and this is not about IBM admitting a weakness. This is about both of them saying, "You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours."
Yes. Which just for the kids out there driving while texting and listening to this podcast, you have to understand. While drinking. Oh, hopefully not. How much these companies hated each other. How they stole from each other, tried to destroy each other, and have been in like a 30-year pissing contest.
But it wasn't. Was it a 30-year pissing contest? Because I feel it was more like a 10-year pissing contest or like a 20-year pissing contest. I don't think Apple, over the last 10 years, I think the culture has changed so much that I don't think that IBM and Apple have even been looking at each other for the last decade.
No, so I guess it's sort of, I guess not 30 years long, but 30 years old.
30 years old.
With the 1984 commercials. But
yeah.
Wow, 30 years ago. I would say, though, that this is the type of thing that it makes too much sense for it to not happen, but I also don't think it wouldn't have happened without Tim Cook at the helm of Apple.
Oh, true.
Oh, come on.
What? Come on. Steve Jobs would never have done it.
Oh, don't start with the Steve would never. That's like a child's game.
Steve would never.
Tim would. It's a smart move. Tim will make a smart move.
You get it on a T-shirt. Tim would.
But Tim would and has done things extremely differently than Steve or any other CEO. But there's no doubt that this is still very much the same Apple. it's a little bit more open to discussion from the outside world. So the monolith has opened its doors an inch, and you can see into the into the nooks and crannies the way that the machine operates. I mean, the Beats deal was so strange in the sense that the Beats deal coming a month or two before the IBM announcement speaks to the fact that Apple is able to segment parts of its company so effectively and still maintain a single goal of selling more hardware.
Yes, so
and ideally, that's what the Beats deal was, and this is what the IBM deal was.
So while Microsoft tries to synthesize companies and acquisitions to be this multi-headed octopus, Apple stays focused on the one thing that it does well, which is producing integrated hardware, and then it partners with other people to fill out its portfolio of things that it either can't provide or has no interest in trying to learn how to do.
Because it knows that it won't do well.
And because it doesn't care. Because it wants to make great hardware with integrated software. And great, we can. This company will help us with our streaming music services, which we don't really care about, but we know that as a platform provider we need to have. And this company will dedicate 100,000 people to sell our phones and tablets in enterprises and then help us make software for them. So thank you for doing that for us. And we can just focus on making really great physical products. Because they're smart enough to know they need them, and they're also smart enough to know to not try to do it themselves.
But that's what I don't get, is that when you guys talked about the Beats deal, and not to get into Steve would never, when the Beats deal was announced, I was like, what the that makes no sense. Like, they're rubbishy headphones that Apple doesn't need, that they already sell in store. Like, I didn't get it. The IBM deal was one where like you, Daniel, my jaw dropped, and I was like, that is the perfect partnership. And I don't think it's fair to compare those two deals at all. Well, I think that the Beats one is a marriage of convenience. It's Apple, waving its superiority around and saying we can do what we want. Like, why bother? We're too lazy. I think the Beats deal is a case of we're too lazy because what's this? Apple can make its own pair of shitty headphones.
They don't want to make shitty headphones.
But it's not the quality of the headphones, it's the quality of the brand. And that's what Beats is. They built a huge brand.
I don't
see the Beats brand as being valuable enough for Apple to want to buy it.
You're not 17.
I'm not far off.
That's not it. I don't think that's the point.
You are.
I think that you have to focus on what the Beats brand gives to Apple. It gives Jimmy Iovine, who has been, they basically spent, I would say, a third of what they bought Beats for on Jimmy himself, because that's been the guy who's championed the Apple brand for 12, 13 years now. And the streaming radio service, the subscription music service, you have to remember all of the legacy, all of the current Apple hardware owes its life to the iPod. And the Apple that we know today wouldn't have survived without iTunes being so vividly integrated into the iPod. And I think that Apple realized it.
Why not spend that money they spent on Beats on developing iTunes into a similar kind of service? They already have the user base there.
Because iTunes is a piece of crap.
They're lazy. They're so lazy. This is like an easy hit for them. And like when the Beats thing was announced, I was like, I'm honestly not joking. I was like, that's a Microsoft move. Like, that is so lazy. It is just so. You could tell they were just like, sure, we'll buy it. Why not?
Because they've tried to add things to iTunes before, and they've failed. They're getting better at learning what they shouldn't play around with, and iTunes is bloated, and I don't think it's lazy. I think they're obviously both marriages of convenience.
I think
debate the level of return on either, but they both reflect the capacity to think outside of what the individuals at Apple can produce on their own versus opportunities with extended partnerships, which is a new thing. Because even when Apple was partnering with Motorola to do phones with music on them, they were so dictatorial with the conditions, and it produced terrible products. This is a little bit. Apple understands that there's a benefit to partnership on somewhat equal terms.
Yeah,
And
but
that's what I don't get. I feel like it's unfair to describe both of them as marriages of convenience, because I see the Beats deal as a marriage of convenience, and I mean convenience for Apple, whereas I feel the IBM deal is like a power move that benefits both equally.
Well,
Apple
Jimmy
didn't buy IBM.
Jimmy and Ray got some mad cash, and like there's some benefits there too, and an Apple email address, which also carries some cachet. So I don't think anyone's unhappy. I also think that IBM, they're so happy to be able to walk in with the hardware that the companies at whatever enterprise they're selling to is already demanding, and they're happy to be working with development teams to produce iOS versions of their enterprise services, which they've been working on and haven't really had the uptick that they want. Like, it's marriages of convenience can be a good thing when everyone is convenienced.
But I think nobody really knew what Apple was up to when they bought Siri in 2009.
Yeah.
And look what happened. It became a front and center feature. And I don't think that they bought Beats just for the subscription service. They don't. I agree with you, Jane. They don't care about the headphones. The headphones are crap, and they know it. And they don't need another hardware brand. They have the best hardware brand in the world. If they started, they sell their iPods or whatever they call them, earpods, for $40 a piece, and they know they don't sound good, but everybody wears them. So I agree with you, but it's not that they bought the company.
No, and I understand that. I know that they bought it for the streaming service, but I don't know a single person who gives a shit about the Beats streaming service.
Because you're not in America. AT&T partnered with Beats to provide a family plan, so you spend $20 a month and you get access to 5 user accounts. It would normally cost you like $50. I think that's what it is, 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think it's 5.
And that's a great deal, because if you want your entire family on a single plan, these are the kinds of deals that Beats got into before Spotify, before Rdio, before Deezer. This is an enterprising company that built itself up from practically nothing in the last 5 years.
People buy Beats headphones because LeBron James and Kobe Bryant wear Beats headphones.
But do they buy Apple products because Kobe Bryant and LeBron James use Apple products? Of course not. They stand on their own merits. I would think that Apple would buy a company because they thought that the company would stand on its own merits. So we'll see.
Not to crash the party, because this is my favorite conversation, but BlackBerry is, no matter, we're talking about who benefits more from all the Apple money, but where BlackBerry is getting left out in the cold.
What?
BlackBerry with this IBM deal.
Oh, well, BlackBerry is basically, let's talk for a second about the fact that BlackBerry is now competing against Apple plus IBM and Google plus Samsung in the enterprise market with containerization, bring your own device, EMM. These are all things that now Apple and Google can offer that BlackBerry has been singularly able to offer in the past. So yeah, I agree with you. BlackBerry's
a fraction of the employees.
Right.
Does it look good, Doug?
This is where I say it doesn't look good.
By the way, look what Daniel got today. That, my friends.
Look at that. That's the future of BlackBerry, right there.
This is the future of BlackBerry. It's a trademark infringed keyboard on an iPhone. This is the final production version of the typo. Ryan Seacrest's
BlackBerry's
baby.
watching and realizing what could have been if they had only partnered with Apple.
Right. Instead of sued the company that created the product. So yeah, I'll be reviewing that.
Bigger than passport, though. I don't get that.
Oh yeah.
But okay, so then people hate us right now for going on about this. So do we want to talk about something that they really care about?
Well, we've already gone 10 minutes over what we promised we would.
What? Already?
We're at 56 minutes.
Mother. Okay.
So let's move on. Let's talk about free-to-play games in the EU. Okay. Now this is a decision.
No. So are we going to talk about free-to-play games, or are we going to talk about the Canadian mobile plans? Are we going to keep it Canadian?
No. We're going to save that for another time. I don't think we have the space or the temperaments to fight with one another on the Canadian mobile plans right now.
It's about to
But
hit me.
um, so this is an interesting topic because there's been a lot of controversy about, what is Candy Crush a free-to-play game? Can you play Candy Crush without spending anything? Of course you can, and King wants you to believe that that's true, but so many free-to-play games today inevitably sell you product or sell you items. So the EU has made a decision to enforce Google and probably Apple down the road to call games that coerce in-app purchases as something else. No longer will they be able to call it free. It may not be called paid, but it won't be called free.
I don't. It's not. They made a series of recommendations. The European Commission made a series of recommendations to Google, Apple, and whatever European game developer body exists. And Google has decided to agree with those conditions. So they actually can't force. This isn't a legal move. They've just decided to implement this. So it's a little bit different because Apple, for its part, has responded to say specifically that they feel like their user-level privacy controls are enough to compete against not only the confusion around whether or not a game is free versus free play versus costing you money, but then the concern that kids are buying or downloading these free-to-play games and then spending untold amounts of money while playing them. So there was a bit of child protectionism, which is...
But it's not actually helping, because now when you go to the App Store in Europe, it's just blank. Like, you have, like, this game is free, this costs $1.99, and this one is blank, and it doesn't actually give you any further information. So what's to stop a kid downloading the app anyway, or a parent downloading it and then saying, here you go, and then the kid's still buying in-app purchases? I feel like it doesn't make any difference at all.
Well, I mean, it's the equivalent of convenience stores hiding cigarettes, but continuing to sell them. So people know what they're doing. I mean, if you know that you're walking into a convenience store with the intent to buy a pack of cigarettes, it makes no difference.
Nobody goes to the App Store with the intent to buy an app that's got in-app purchases, though. Like, I feel like having it blank there does nothing to educate. And I feel like that's the problem here, because they're saying you can't call these free to play because people download them and they don't know that there's in-app purchases. So I feel like the solution to that problem would be to put a disclaimer saying this app requires in-app purchase, or this app, supports in-app purchases.
Well, I think
already do.
Because it's kind of like the EU approach to attempt to legislate user behavior. So they are trying to hide the cigarettes from the kids, and one of the conditions for this was not only just the labeling of free versus paid games, but then also to limit the amount to change the terms and conditions of the store to prevent promotion of these games to children. But I also feel that it's essentially feckless if there's no mechanism to actually stop kids from downloading what they want, which
there is a mechanism to prevent them from spending parents' money. Yes. And I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, there's a timer so that you can ask previously it gave you 30 minutes between entering a password, because your credit card is already stored in the Google or Visa or Apple account, so you wouldn't have to enter your Visa number or MasterCard, but you would have to enter your password. That is now have the option of forcing people to re-enter your password for every purchase. So that's enough. I mean, right there, if you don't give your kid your password, they can't purchase in-app purchases anymore. Yeah. The end.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Which is essentially Apple's argument too, right? Because with the iOS 8, will have kind of family payment provisions on it, so they don't feel like they're gonna need to gut their free store in order to prevent this from happening. But I'm just wondering, so from North American or Canadian versus European perspective, do we feel like this is something that the Canadian government or the U.S. government would ever attempt to do? Is this a particularly EU approach to trying to solve a problem?
I think so. I think the
regulation in the EU is
I think it's notorious for doing things for the consumer that are so blindly misguided. I mean, to give another example, they had the the Microsoft anti-competition browser thing, where they were like, you have to give everyone like a browser ballot page when they first try, like they buy a new computer and they try and open up Internet Explorer. You have to give them the choice to download another browser because it's not fair that you have to force them to use Internet Explorer. And I think it's something that the EU thinks people give a crap about, but people don't.
Well,
I don't feel it's a problem that requires legislation. I think it's a stretch to call it a problem to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess this is different. This is not anti-competitiveness. I mean,
yeah, that's what I mean, though. But it goes back to things that the EU thinks are issues for consumers, but are, I think, decidedly not.
Right.
Well, it's a huge issue for game developers who exist in an economy where no one is willing to pay $5 up front for a game. So they've created a system whereby they offer a free version with incentives towards spending money. Because the other issue with this that Daniel, I think you noted right off the bat, is how do you tell the difference between a game that offers value-added purchases in it to enhance and have more fun versus a game that's like a casino slot machine just designed to take money from you? And that's not something that you can legislate at a broad level, but it's going to hurt developers who are just trying to actually make a buck off of their efforts.
But they're not. They're not trying to make a buck. They're trying to make 99 bucks for 4,000 gems. And that's the problem, is that if you're going to legislate the idea of a free-to-play game, don't legislate the fact that you can call it a free-to-play game, because that is fundamentally what it is. You can play it for free, and eventually, if you don't want to spend money, you close it. I think if you're going to legislate, it's the idea of legislating the gun or legislating the bullets. Don't legislate the gun, legislate the bullets. Chris Rock was right. That's kind of his that hilarious stand-up routine where he's like, guns can be free, but if the bullet costs $5,000, nobody's going to use it unless they really want to kill somebody.
Okay.
It's the same idea.
So then, what's the corollary to that? Like, what's the example of the bullet-to-bullet legislation? Because we're with these free-to-play games, you have a situation where not every bullet is created equally, right? So do you now need a commission to evaluate each game? Do you
need free-to-play, free-to-download, different distinctions for the casino games versus the games that you can download and play, but not past level 5.
Because the mentality, the psychology behind the design exists. I was at the Ottawa International Gaming Conference a few months ago, sitting on a panel of free-to-play developers, and each developer had one was the casino game developer, one was the developer making branded games for high-level IPs for movie launches and things like that, and then one was that kind of casual puzzle game designer who's using free-to-play as a way to stay alive monetarily. And they all are going after a different psychological result with the game design. But that's only something that comes across after days or weeks of playing the game to see how the users are responding and what they're willing to spend on and play. So how do you legislate against that? How do you create how do you label the bullets differently and easily?
There's no. I don't think there's a need to legislate. I'm just saying if you're going to legislate something, limit the maximum amount that you can spend in a game at once. Because my issue is that you say if a kid asks his or her parents for access to in-app purchases, they're going to go for the $99 recommended bundle. Over
buy all the gems for sure.
Right, because why not? I mean, that's the best value. So that's my issue. It's that these companies are pushing these ridiculous payment strategies on people rather than focusing on microtransactions. And in the long run, it's like buying tickets for a game and then being made to feel guilty for having to use all of them, even if because you've already spent it, you might as well continue using them until they're gone.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it just becomes this end cycle of, so now they're just going to design levels where you basically have to spend 50 cents to get past it, so they're not hitting the money cap, but they're forcing everyone to spend 50 cents. I just think if we're going to legislate this stuff, let's focus at the carrier level and get them to stop charging us for data rather than the games that we play. But I think hey, it's cool to be in Canada where we have the freedom to play whatever games we want and spend how much we want, rather than a nanny state.
That's right. Kim Kardashian is benefiting from that free market right now. She is
So much money.
so much money. Sad. Speaking of so much money, $329. That is the price of the NVIDIA Shield tablet. And this was announced yesterday. It is the second generation tablet in NVIDIA's Shield line. Instead of coming with a controller built in, like the clamshell original, this is going to be sold separately. So the actual tablet is $329. You spend $59.99 for the wireless controller and $39.99 for the case/stand. And you have one of the fastest tablets on the market. This is going to come to Canada. It's going to come in 16 and 32 gigabyte versions. The 16 gigabyte version will have Wi-Fi only. The 32 gigabyte will have LTE capabilities. It'll also come with its own Tegra store, so you can buy games that have been created specifically for the Shield tablet. I really like this idea. I think that gaming on Android has improved tremendously in the last few years, and not only is the NVIDIA Shield tablet capable of playing any current Android game, but it's also got the ability to accept stream games from Kepler-based GPUs on desktop. So if you have a really good game, a really high-resolution game like Batman Arkham City or something, you can actually stream it to your device over local Wi-Fi or over LTE. So what do you guys think of this? Jane, does this strike you as an impressive product?
I don't get it. I don't get how the first generation Shield was pitched as a handheld gaming console that could play PC games via streaming, or but then I don't get, and their whole point, their whole shtick was that the controller's there, like people don't want to play on a touch screen, but now they're selling a tablet, a controller, and a case all separately. Like, I don't understand why they're not just charging me $360 and giving me all of those things as the same thing, because I feel like it's kind of like Microsoft and the Xbox One and the Kinect, whereas in the beginning, people asked, are you going to sell it without the Kinect? And Microsoft was like, no, the Kinect is an integral part of the platform and it will not be sold separately. And like, it is now, but I feel like
you just answered your own question though. The reason why they debundled them is because the bundled version didn't sell.
It was way too expensive.
It was too expensive. But I feel like that's another area where I feel like Microsoft should have stuck to its guns and said no. Like, and I was really impressed when they said, we feel that this is part of the platform. It's necessary for people to get the full Xbox One experience, and we don't want to sell it separately. And I feel like NVIDIA should be selling everything as a bundle, because what's going to happen is we're going to review this device and we're going to say, yeah, it's awesome, and then people are going to say, well, I don't want to buy everything separately. Like, what if I only want to buy, like, I don't want to spend $400 or how much, I don't know how much it's going to be in total, but on like all these different pieces.
Well, they're going to sell. I think they're going to sell it the way that the market dictates that they want to purchase it, and I think this tablet looks like a hot shit piece of gaming, but there are also some people that want this tablet and the hardware and the streaming capabilities, but don't necessarily want the controller.
Why wouldn't you want the controller?
Because so maybe you really like playing certain Android games and you want them to run really well, but maybe they're not like first-person shooter games or things like that. Maybe you just want to get some XCOM going on, or the Walking Dead games that don't really require a controller and just have a touch interface, and you're going to save yourself.
But then they also don't require 192 CUDA cores or the Tegra K1. Like, they don't require that kind of power.
Right, buy like an entry-level Samsung Galaxy Tab, and you'll get the same experience.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the better comparison is to the Surface tablet not being bundled with the keyboard,
yeah,
which is essential to creating the experience that Microsoft is advertising in every one of their commercials. Yep. I think 100%. That, Doug, this is a very powerful Android tablet that you can buy for not a lot of money, but on its own, it's no better than the Nexus 7, which is $150 cheaper.
Doug, you are the 55-year-old man who spends $800 on a Surface because they want an iPad.
No, I'm not that guy.
His haircut says otherwise.
So then, so is it just a psychological thing where anyone who buys the Surface tablet is going to pay for the keyboard, but they do the math, like they understand the price of the tablet and they don't really pay attention to the weatherproofing and the accessories and the tax on top?
I think you can say that people don't pay attention to tax, or people will only focus on that kind of price when it's tax, when it's like a negligible amount. But when it's like a $200 keyboard and, you know, extra bit, like when it's a significant portion of the price, I feel like people aren't going to overlook. I think people are more likely to be mad.
Okay.
People are more likely to get that tablet home and they'd be like, why doesn't it come with the keyboard that I saw in the commercial?
Okay.
Well, that costs $150 extra.
Is it because potentially the really hardcore gamers who are looking for a portable service like this are using a different controller alternative?
You mean they've already bought one?
Like, well, just that, or
is
just
it
like
compatible with third-party controllers?
Yes.
my man
is.
Kevin Toffel at GigaOhm games using Android tablets, and then some gaming service that allows him to use like basically a generic Bluetooth Xbox controller essentially.
Right.
So maybe they don't want the controller shell. They want something else, or they just want the ability to choose.
Yeah. So I guess down the road, Jane, they will bundle, just like Xbox One comes with a game. Some bundles you spend a little bit more, but you get a game and an extra controller. Eventually, I'm sure they will bundle all three items together and charge you $80 instead of $100. But I agree with Doug. Some people don't need a stand because they'll figure out another way, or they'll lay it down on a table, and they already have a $60 controller, and they don't want to be forced to spend that money.
Yeah, but what my principal problem is what you just said. They'll, quote, figure out another way. I don't think anybody should have to figure out another way to get the experience that's advertised.
But these are hardcore gamers. I mean, these guys have been creating their own PCs for 20 years now.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me that. Like, I came from a place where we catered exclusively to hardcore gamers and enthusiasts. I still feel that they're not about doing things the hard way just because they think it's easier.
Yes,
I don't know. No, they're
100%
about doing things the hard way, or they're about doing things the hard way because it provides a better experience. And I don't think like propping it up on a stack of like books on a table because I don't want to buy the stand separately is about, you know, providing a better experience. I feel like that's about like MacGyvering myself a solution because I don't want to spend the money
but
for
I mean,
the experience that I was offered.
The same argument can be made for the iPad. You know, the iPad has a 9.7-inch screen, or any Android tablet that's ideal for watching media. None of them come with stands built in. The Surface comes with a stand. It's the only tablet that actually comes with a stand built in anymore. So, you know, this is not unique to the tablet.
I know, and it makes you sound like a hypocrite because when it comes to tablets for consuming media, my position is if I want a stand, I'll buy a cover that has a stand.
Yes. Okay, so you're the old man in this situation.
Yes.
But so then let's flip this around and then just spitball, because I know we're going to discuss this in a tete-a-tete. But what is the ideal Android gaming setup?
The first Shield, even though
the
it's
iPad.
only a sin.
Wow. Okay.
I'm interested in. I think that the most interesting aspect of this device is the Wi-Fi controller, which apparently promises improved latency over. I don't know. I have no opinion yet.
Yes.
I have no
so
opinion yet.
We'll be getting the tablet and we'll be looking at it.
Hells yeah.
Impressive. I think that it's an interesting. It's a showcase more than anything. It's a showcase of the Tegra K1, which is a Cortex A15 based CPU. Plus this new Kepler-based GPU that promises to be way faster than anything on the market. I do agree that most Android games can't take nearly advantage of it, but this is really the Android equivalent of the A7. Like, you know, Doug, you were talking about Metal and how it makes it easier for developers to create really great games on iOS using like porting over console quality games for the A7 chip. I'm guessing that NVIDIA is going to make it seriously easy for developers to optimize their games for the K1.
Yeah, and then I think that relates into the store, right, where you're going to get all those Unreal Engine games just streaming on this thing, right?
For sure.
but it's interesting. Is this we haven't played with it yet, but is this the Alienware of Android gaming tablets, or does
I
that
don't
exist?
know. Does
I don't
Alienware make Android tablets? I don't think they do.
No,
Well,
but
but I
I
just
was
mean
going
like
to say I
the
don't think Alienware is the Alienware of gaming machines. Like I don't know if Alienware is even really relevant anymore.
Can you even make that a comparison? Because Alienware, I mean, PC games, you optimize all these various settings and anti-aliasing and high resolution, for the specific setup that you have. But Android and iOS aren't really designed that way. So, it does speak to the fact that mobile gaming is not really aimed at an enthusiast market the way that
Yeah.
PC
Okay.
gaming is.
So I will say that this isn't mobile gaming so much as portable gaming, which is why that NVIDIA is creating its own store for games optimized for a tablet. This is already selling to such a minor, minor segment. Like, Daniel, you said that the best gaming tablet is the iPad, right? Like, people buying this thing are looking for they're looking for that PC experience that they can take with them because their custom PC is really friggin' heavy, and they can't take it with them.
Right.
Correct?
Yes, but it is still a tablet.
Yeah, but I
It's
think
still
that
limited by Android.
but I think it's doing more for, as Doug said, portable gaming than any kind of gaming laptop workstation ever did, which still weighed a friggin' ton and was quote unquote portable. So I think it is a case of it's not mobile gaming, it's PC gaming, but I don't know.
Okay. So
Again,
I think we have to get this thing, spend a weekend with it doing some serious user testing, and then in a future podcast come back
Are you
with
gonna
our
play
impressions.
Bejeweled?
Well, I'm just gonna spend maybe $150 on Candy Crush.
There you go. So that we can kill two
Because you're
birds with one
Canadian, you
stone.
can.
Yeah.
So let's move on. We're gonna have our second app roundup, and we'll do it really quickly because if anybody's actually still listening, they may be quite upset.
God, I hope so.
So so I'm gonna go first. My app of the week is Carousel by Dropbox. I'm a huge Dropbox fan. Carousel was released a couple of months ago in an effort to focus on just the photo portion of the Dropbox experience. So for the last couple of years, Dropbox has been pushing individuals to upload all of their mobile and desktop photos, anything that they upload through an SD card or just take on their phone in general, it automatically gets uploaded. Carousel actually breaks down your photos into location, into times, into chronologically, and it makes it really easy to flip between them really quickly and share them with family and friends. I've been using it quite a lot more than I anticipated, and it's available for iOS and Android. And if you are a Dropbox user, I would heartily recommend it.
How is it? If I'm an iOS user, how is that any different than, say, the iOS 7 photo experience? Because a lot of those features are in line, or is it not really?
It is. It's exactly the same. It's the same as iOS 8's iCloud photo backup, but iOS 8 doesn't exist yet, and until now, iCloud pricing has been way too high to justify backing up all your photos to iCloud, and there wasn't a front-end portal like there is in Dropbox. So Carousel is a platform play. It just makes it easier and better and more intuitive for Dropbox users to archive and look through their photos. Doug, go.
Oh, man. Okay, so I can't believe we're going to be ending the conversation with this, but so I've been thinking a lot about two different apps this week. One is an app that I use that I feel morally that I shouldn't, and the other is an app that I don't want to use, but I feel like I should in support, and those two apps are Swarm and Tinder. So I don't know if this is the time that we're going to have this conversation, but how do you guys, and we were talking about free-to-play games and the ethics of that, and are the apps on your phone purely about utility? Do you feel any emotional connection? I was a hardcore Foursquare guy. I know a lot of the people at Foursquare. I like them a lot. I in no way want to use Swarm, but I feel like out of some sort of legacy support that I should, keep giving it a go until it provides me the experience I want from it. On the other hand, Tinder has been providing me the experience that I want from it, but the company behind Tinder is facing significant concerns around its misogynist culture, to put it as briefly as I can, and it creates a pause whether I should support a company that I can't ethically support, or should I support the app use of a company that I can't ethically support. So I'm wondering. That's what I've been thinking about this week. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but
no, I don't. I mean, unless the app is, it's the Woody Allen argument, right? Like, can you love the product without loving the man?
wow.
And,
Burn.
no, I'm serious. Like, okay, the Roman Polanski, if you want to do it.
Okay, with someone who's
if
actually.
it's the too soon argument there, but I mean, seriously, like. Can you separate the people who create the app from the app itself? And I think you have to. I mean, you're not talking to the misogynist pigs who created the app. You're talking to the lovely women of Toronto. Or maybe you are, but that's your choice. And for a lot of people, Tinder has opened up a new world of dating that, whatever, Plenty of Fish or whatever the other one is that you just couldn't get on mobile.
Okay, so take it the other way then. Is there any apps that kind of stuck that you use because you either anticipate that they're going to be better eventually and you want to kind of stick with them, or because it's like the good guys bad band scenario where it's not that great but you kind of want to stick with it?
I mean, Instagram is kind of my default. Like, I use Instagram a lot, but most of the photos that are posted on my feed are terrible. Most of the photos that I post are terrible. But I love it, and I'm unabashed about liking likes, and I'm unabashed about that like teenage side of me that really pushes for, oh, how many likes did I get on this photo, and will this framing be a 15 like or a 25 like photo? I mean, it makes no sense rationally. I shouldn't give a damn about it, but I do, and like I think a lot of people do.
But that's like a third category of your guilty pleasure app that you shouldn't like. So you're saying that Instagram is your Tinder, Daniel?
Instagram is my Tinder. Well, I'm engaged, so.
You're just a boy standing in front of an app asking it to help you.
Yes, exactly. So Jane, what about you? What's your app of the week?
My app is not really an app of the week. It's more of a promise of an app of the week, which I guess might tie into Doug's. Like, do you use an app because you know it's going to be better soon? Is that Apple? Google is going to release the Android Wear custom watch face API soon-ish, and they've asked people not to ask developers not to publish their workaround custom watch face apps to the App Store for now. So right now, creating a custom watch face is doable, but you have to make like a standalone application, and it's not a pretty process. And Google has asked that developers not push them to the App Store because it will create a bad experience for users, and they'll have, I guess, like support issues down the line when Android L and all that gets pushed to Wear, and they do end up releasing the custom watch face API. And I would like to confirm that yes, custom watch face apps in the App Store create a shitty user experience and are not pleasant to use. We tried a couple of them during the weekend and did not like them. They're awful.
Most of them are
They're made
awful.
by like people who have no taste, and just like they're not custom watch face APIs. They're just 10 other ugly watch faces that you can put on your watch if you feel so inclined.
Exactly.
They're gross, and the usability is crap, and they're not user-friendly at all.
You're hoping or expecting that the experience will somehow improve?
Because Google told me it would. Yeah.
And we believe everything Google says.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel, because I'm sure there's a Daniel out there that's listening. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and stayed put for the hour-and-a-half long SyrupCast episode 5. It was double the length that we promised you would be.
We're going to go 2 hours next time.
Yeah.
2.5.
The marathon session, 24 hours eventually. That'll be SyrupCast episode 10. So we'll see you next week. We're going to be trying to broadcast on Thursdays, publishing on Fridays. We're going to do our best to have the same routine every week. So and we'll eventually do it live. So we'll do a live hangout on air. We'll invite everybody to join us, and we'll see how that goes as well. So until next week, thank you, and have a great week. Bye, guys.
Bye.